So I feel like we covered a ton yesterday, but in a fairly disorganized manner, and left to me and how I think and talk, it'll remain disorganized, which at least I think is on theme for when we start with rhizomes, move towards BWOs, and then encounter the face in motion. And as usual, I'm just riffing, not really thinking. But so where we left off yesterday, I feel like we'd sort of talked about the idea of the meme as something like the map that D&G talk about when they're talking about the rhizome. So, something that refers to a territory of not yet. It's not tracing things, and it's also not to do with points. So it's not, and you could take this point polysemously. You could say the point is not to make a point, like sort of as far as syntagmatic or semantic structures go. But you could also then say, well, it's not about a point in territories. It's not going somewhere. And then I would link it to this. It's always, the meme, and wasn't from the readings we were doing. It's from whatever the three novellas plateau is. But, when they say, we have stories, but tales don't say what happened. They say, is something about to happen? I think we sort of talked about this. We sort of talked about, the various ideas of the BWO. So, the fact that it's not that it doesn't have organs that function, it's that it has organs that function as functions rather than organizing principles. And then I think, Victor brought up, I think, a pretty interesting claim about mnemonics, which we sat on for a while, which after thinking about it, it's 3 a.m. for me, and I flipped my whole life cycle to do this, but I've been thinking about it since I got up a few hours ago. And I feel, just if this is all about mnemonics, so, making us recall, see a grammar, maybe it's a heuristics and a hermeneutics. This is deeply troubling for any claims I might have about the rhizomatic nature of the meme, because it does then seem to be making points. And where we left off explicitly yesterday, or where the last comment that I made yesterday, was something to do with memes and the synthesis of time. And so Deleuze, he has, and as I said yesterday, Deleuze and the synthesis of time and Deleuze and cinema, especially, the time image, are the parts of Deleuze's work that I'm least familiar with. But I would I want to sort of hazard a provocation here, in some sense, to say, and this will link back to the fact that we don't, the famous passage in Deleuze and Guattari, you say, should we lean further into this direction? Accelerate the processes. We haven't seen anything yet. I still think the meme is struggling to break the bonds of grammar, and the future synthesis of time, which for Deleuze, and this is my really basic and grasping understanding, would be to say it's a static synthesis of time, unequally distributed from past to future. And I think that maybe the meme is struggling to weight that balance into the future rather than the passive and unconscious synthesis of time as is and time as past, and how this I think relates to an argument not against but striving against say mnemonics and entropy, and I might say is that it's always trying to disturb the faculty of memory or recall and still exercise its affect. Now, just from scrolling through my scrolling through my own memes, which I think I'll just try and share. Yeah. So I realize they all do have a grammar, like my 4 plans, delta variant, it's a really normal thing, except for with hope he's not dead, Nick Land. is he dead? Like, also, if anyone else, or like, if someone sees this, go, oh, Lacan and the phallus, that's just a recall of a dumb joke, and clear that Luke doesn't understand Lacan very well. So, but then I think like we are sort of striving for absurdities. Like when I do this, like I know that if you read D&G, and especially if you've like, this, I made this with the thought of this sort of seminar in mind. If you've read D&G, you might go, it's D&G. But I feel like it's also clearly not meant to be interpreted or understood. And if the recall is only to recall senselessness, I feel like that's at least striving to get beyond the fragmented text and towards that sort of, text against the taproot, text of, is something going to happen, not the text of the world tree. Like, so I'm still like, I feel like, so Victor has really disturbed me in some sense, which is fantastic. But I'm still like, I have these hopes for memes, but only because this is, sort of how I feel like,
Can you elaborate? Why are you disturbed? Like, why am I? What that you see?
Oh, yeah, no.
Your horror.
Yeah, so yeah, the disturbance is that like when I disagreed, like I think without a particularly coherent argument against your point, because I don't think I got it for quite a while. But when you say but it seems like theory, and I think also memes. I think you also said memes, but you said that theory. Everyone's talking about the same thing. I was really like, oh, that can't be the case. How could that be the case? It's a matter of difference. Like even repetition is difference. Like I'm a Deleuzean cultist. I need to believe this to hold tight to all of the time that I've put into this. But so when I say it disturbed me, what I really mean is it was a provocation to go further into the limits of the thought, the limits of my experience inside of theory. And so I still like, so why I'm disturbed is because now I'm more convinced that maybe everyone is talking about the same thing. But I also think the thing that they're talking about is often, and I think memes are not all memes, but I think some memes, whether or not they would remain memes, are trying to again challenge, provoke, or disturb the fact that everyone is talking about the same thing, or everyone is working on a mnemonic function, or everyone is looking in some sense to have some kind of effect on entropy that suits their purpose. So so like my disturbance here is that I feel that my position of everyone's talking about something different has been completely rolled back to almost going, of course we're all talking about the same thing, but still hoping, just like I think when D&G talk about the problem of the world book, and then the problem of the book with a fragmented unity that has a false multiplicity, we're all still trying, not all of us, but I still think there are moments when we are trying to do this, and I still think that that's really important. And like I know that I go for I go for cheap shots on Instagram. I like this, but the things that I'm most satisfied with are the most incoherent things, which I'm also surprised to go, why didn't anyone like this? It's wild. It's a new thing. But also that's clearly not why most people are following a meme page. They want the joke. And I get that jokes have a grammar. And this brings me back to where I think I sort of started yesterday. I feel like an asshole talking about this because I'm theorizing jokes. Explaining the punchline is going to, it brings the sad passion into the joke. So I feel like I've just been raving. I hope and if you were here yesterday, this is clearly what I do. And I will now shut up and take any questions or opening gambits from the other panelists or participants. And great to be back.
Maybe I can add one thing about the mnemonic thing, like to maybe complement why I feel this is so strongly justified. but there's a very famous paper called the magic number 7 plus or minus 2, and it's one of the most cited papers in psychology. And what it boils down to is that we have some sort of bandwidth in our brain that involves operations with 7 elements. So we tend to chunk things into bigger blocks, but at the end, through some cognitive hardware, we need to organize things into sets of more or less 7. Right. So the fact that at one point we have this, how do you call it? What's the English word for this? The bottleneck. We have this bottleneck. This is why mnemonics become this sort of necessity, because the moment you're trying to understand more of the universe and theorize and create these theories, with whatever stage of human culture, we've always had something. They were more religious, they were more mythical and narrative in the past, but still there was some coding for like wisdom, and they always have the limit of the number 7. So they always can be passed on. The most important things that can be passed on are the things that people can remember. So they somehow involve this packing of wisdom and knowledge into first language, and then myth, and then all these things that build. But in the way to optimize the carry of entropy, the carry of information through generation, they have these bottlenecks they have to fill, they have to set. And this is why grammar is, if you think about grammar and syntaxes, generally you don't have as much elements. You try to create a grammar that in the end packs things into something that's more manageable, and you do this packing, so it's always within this 7 plus or minus 2, right? And that's my justification for the mnemonic thing, why I feel it is so relevant.
Yeah, so I think that's interesting, and like, and I guess I'm aware, like vaguely aware of that principle from like a first year psychology class, but I haven't thought about it in so long. But in some sense, I think, you know, it might seem, to me, in some sense, it seems absurd in some sense, because I feel like as far as like, you know, things, okay, our communications in some sense have become more efficient over time, because, you know, I think things become simplified. You know, we develop shorthands, you know, slang, idiomatic language, etc. And certainly the meme falls into the under the rubric of idiom, like quite a lot of the time. But then when I might think theory often seems like needlessly complex. Like, you know, it introduces problems not just with, say, interpretation, but with, you know, the actual approach to the text. And I know that D&G is sort of suspicious of Burroughs as like a sort of a crypto world tree creator, with like a fragmented rather than a multiple text. But if you try and read, say, something like Naked Lunch or Soft Machine, it rejects, you know, the simplicity of communication, and in some sense rejects the fact that you're trying to read that book. And then I would say, like, you know, D&G aren't always doing this, but the first time, you know, I encountered, you know, geology of morals, what does the earth think that it is? You know, there's a narrator, you know, a fictional character who you'd recognize from Doyle if you read that kind of stuff, but it in no way tries to help you understand what's going on. And like just from critical literature around D&G areas, you know, people saying they use a lot of shorthand that they understand that no one else will, and then they fucking publish it. So this doesn't seem to me to be about mnemonics, unless like they go, you know, we expect you to get Guattari's diary and find out, you know, what he really meant, which you kind of don't from the fragments I've read, pee pee poo poo, etc. So like, I'm not sure.
It is a packing of wisdom, because like a lot of the things that theory talks about, they're processes, and it's, if you think, so it's like the uncertainty principle. If you want to understand the trajectory of something, or sort of this distribution over time, you will sort of lose where it is right now. So you see movement, but you don't see the exact position. So if you crystallize something in the text too much, you don't see actually the process is talking about. And I feel this is also sort of the same thing that's about Hegel, that it goes on and on and on, and it doesn't really try to explain. And the thing is through falling to the same trying to catch him up, you unpack something. So it is a mnemonics of unpacking still, like, to me, it still fits, you know, because you have to, if our brains can only pack 7 or 9 things at a time, you have to make the things ever more convoluted. The pack, they have to start abusing language. They have to start making second guess what they're talking. So that, like you say, you go and you look more. Because how can you make someone not go through 10,000 hours of information to something that takes 10,000 hours of information to think about?
Sure. So you know, I have some, you know, this is why I'm disturbed, because that sounds very persuasive to me. But what I have unpacked from my time with these theories, you know, and all the adjacent things, including the meme culture that's developed around it, is to say this might be the case, but it need not be. So there would be, you know, this is very much that, you know, Nick Land's level 2, you know, to go beyond the you know, to go beyond this you know, anthropomorphic, anthropogenic, you know, anthropoepistemic field that we find ourselves, you know, sort of trapped in. And, you know, clearly, you know, I don't think we're there, but I do think that there is, you know, like there is a descriptive term, like, right. So like, I think what you're saying is descriptively true, but I don't think that it's like prescriptively true as far as, you know, the organization of our, you know, maybe epistemic libidos go. And, you know, because also we can also,
its potential for prediction is not that good. Maybe it's one, in hindsight, it feels perceiving because you're looking, sure, we understand it, but what do we do with this information? So this is kind of what you're saying, like, what does it really imply to think? And I totally agree. I don't really know, but at the moment, I think this is more about thinking counterfactually. So if you know that some things are modeled like this, what does this counterfactually imply for whenever you get some new information and you have to think, okay, why does this exist? What is its contingency? And then you think, can I think of its contingency as some mnemonic device to carry something? Or why has this thing perpetuated itself until now? And it can be said for any individual, anything. Like,
yeah, so I think that's sort of counter to, I guess, like the theory of the rhizome or something, because one, like, sort of posting up, you know, I do understand that, like, just this, you know, we need, like, it's very difficult to talk about logic or philosophy if we don't think about universals. Like, we have to understand that this is the filthiest thing you can say in a Deleuze seminar, like, there are categories or some shit like that. But you might you say, like, to think in the terms of counterfactual. I don't just have to think in the counterfactual. You can try and think the other, which, you know, it may or may not be, but not set as a sort of an opposition to. So this is this. It could be otherwise. How do we think otherwise without trying to think, you know, whether it's dialectically or in terms of negation? You know, but I think negation usually comes back to dialectics. Shit, I had something else, but now it's just completely slipped. Counterfactually.
But when you say categories, just so I know what you're talking about, when you say that there are categories, you mean as in archetypical structures or really Platonist categories?
Oh yeah, so I think in some sense I'm talking like as a, like, as Plato, right? Or, you know, it could be Plato, it could be Aristotle, it could be Jung. For any of these things, I think, you know, they give us a good sense of heuristics. So we might say, you know, we you know, the part of the form of the mind is you know, 7 plus or minus 2. Now and then just to think of it sort of along the lines of, you know, I think this is a very Deleuzean approach. You say, okay, not why is that the case, in sort of like, you know, work it out logically. You know, you do the transcendental kind of investigation and say, what are the prevailing conditions that cause this to be the case, and then, you know, where are the potentials for a difference emerging from? So, you know, I guess that could be a counterfactual.
But do you realize that when you say 7 plus or minus 2, one of these things could be Michael, the other thing could be the history of the state of Israel, this is the one thing that you can put into this lot, and the other thing can be whatever thing we have to have a symbol, we have to have some references, so it's something you can point to, right? This is a necessity in a way, but it's a pointer to any set of things. So whatever you can, it kind of gives you, you can implement any sort of dialectical B operator thing, because with 3 elements, you have A, D, and something between A and B. So it's a really basic to start developing any sort of ontological kickstart to anything. It's just somehow at one point, when you grow to things that are 7 to 9, you have to deal with this bottleneck. And we know it happened, but it's never really clear why at any point phenomenologically this was packed this way or another way. Why people decided to use this word for this thing. Okay, we can look at etymology is also all in hindsight like this. You can believe whatever etymological reconstruction for a word, but it never tells you why people really choose that. Maybe it just sounded cooler at the time. It was just a slang. I don't know. Why? Then that's the memetical potential. At the time, at one point, memes were more just a word, right? People started having some weird sound to describe any phenomenological thing, a happening, an event, or something.
Yeah, yeah. So it does make sense, and like, you know, and as a descriptive model, like I think this is all, you know, and this is why I say the descriptive model disturbs and provokes me, but it doesn't disturb, but it only encourages me further into my foolishness, in the sense of, you know, to say looking for a way out, because, you know, I'm, you know, and this might just be sort of my affect, it might just be, you know, how my desires are organized or something, you know, just along the lines of, you know, our origins don't necessarily determine futures. And if, you know, even if like we are a determinist, you say like possibilities are retrofitted, you know, onto because we don't have this full view of the categories or of, you know, of any of these things, like whether it's, you know, the history of Israel or the, you know, or someone named Deebs, etc. Like, because we're constant, like it seems that we can encounter things that would avoid that mnemonic, and like probably not in memes, but I'm thinking very much of sort of, you know, things that fall under, if you can put, I'm uncomfortable with the term rubric for the sublime. You know, the sublime resists a universal, so it must resist the mnemonic, and it's a disturbance of the capacity to know or remember or categorize, and I think that this is always like to inject Deleuze into that. That's an encounter with the BWO, in that, like for Kant, it reaffirms your humanness and your reason when you realize that you can't universalize this. I think for Deleuze, it sets you off on a new path. This is the line of flight. It's not a point. It has no point. So, and because it's pointless, I think that it needs to like, and I think this is really abstract, and I don't think that I'm sort of just talking about my project in capital letters, but because I do think, you know, descriptively what you're saying makes sense to me. It's deeply troubling, and in some sense, you know, and I'm a pessimistic shithead, but it's deeply pessimistic that we would think that, you know, the limits of description and categorization that we currently face are enough for anything. You know, and you know, I feel like a year ago, and I think, you know,
what do you mean enough? You mean saying that enough in the sense that we can describe all the potentiality that there is and there could be?
Yeah, so enough in the sense of, you know, understanding difference or disorganization, because you know, like, you know, like to describe potential, I think it would be in some sense, like, I mean, and this is strictly, I think, in Deleuzean usage. I don't think it's got anything to do with, you know, with physics or, you know, anything else that potential could be used but, you know, I think for Deleuze, potential is massively removed from the idea of the possible. The possible is always, you know, according to a given set of rules, which say we understand the categories, we understand all these universals, we understand how they connect. But potential is that, like I think we were talking about yesterday, potential always remains in the virtual, in the fact that it's real and powerful, but not actual. And it seems like, and the whole point of like the, joking about Nick Land and level 2 is that at this point, we have no access to that future. We have no access to that understanding. And the point is to strive into that unknowing, to intensify that. I think that's the point of the BWO, whether it's a descriptive model or a hopeful, speculative, or even dramatic model. Like I think as Artaud, developed it. So when I say it's not enough, I just mean it's to me, this isn't philosophy. It's science. It's descriptive, and they're always interconnected. And I'm not shitting on science at all. Science, art, philosophy, clearly working as a rhizome in some sense. But for me, like we're doing this descriptive thing, and it can't and I might just agree with you. Yes, this is how things are, but and this is a long way from memes. Unless memes that really are magical, then like it seems that like it's. I hope that that's not the end. Like things can change, and they don't necessarily change dialectically. So I feel like I need to I've talked fucking way too much, and I don't feel like I've put up a good defense against what Victor's said, because what I do remains in the vague. I say we need to keep striving towards the actual multiplicity in the text, not just the fragmented or the crypto unified world tree. Because I'm stuck in the 7 plus or minus 2. I'm stuck in Lacanian symbolic order, which I guess is sort of what I also think it is. It's still a symbolic order because it lets us understand and structure things according to a particular kind of interpretative structure. We say, facts don't care about your feelings. Well, facts are always, this is very David Hume, but facts are structured by your feelings, because raw data is almost nothing. Or it's literally meaningless without interpretation.
Sorry, you have a good point there, man. But I think you have a good point there in the mnemonic aspect, because, and this is something that's also scientific. Our memory is not basic on mere storage of information on a very cognitive low level basis. Both feelings and our hormonal reactions, they are all a part of some also mnemonic system of memorization. So why do you shoot adrenaline, and this changes how you react to something to get a fight or flight thing? This is also something that's coded on you, so that you're not constantly into that thing. But you know that when you're there, the chance that you take some certain types of decisions and you act in a certain way increases, which is good for your preservation in some senses. But you don't want to be in a fight or flight thing when you're doing an exam, or I don't know, when you're in a situation where you should be calm or otherwise, So you are coding a whole type of process to the environment around you on a state that is connecting to a feeling or to whatever. The fact that someone you like can say something to you that's hurtful, and it can drain your energy for the whole day and affects several things. This is also a mnemonic thing in a way, because that means in whatever information that person passed, processed you, and charged his feelings, there was a change in state coded for you, whatever that person intended it or not, right?
Well,
and this is, yeah.
Sorry, I need to butt in, because with every passing moment, I continue to lose my opportunity to say something stupid and get away with it, with the fact that I'm late as my excuse. So the amount of time that I've experienced here has now kind of the ratio is now in balance. So I've been here longer than I haven't been here, and so now I have to say things that are slightly less stupid. So I should have spoken up sooner. But are we just asking if a map exists? Is this a question about whether or not there's semiotics?
What's the word you used before? Sorry.
Are we asking if there's a map?
A map.
Because I mean, you can be building a model out of as many or as few buckets as you want, but that doesn't necessarily end up changing the quantities or qualities that you're trying to describe, nor does it necessarily end up informing us what we end up determining those buckets to be or to contain, right?
I'm trying to make a response to that. Yeah, in a way, it is a map, and you as an individual, you have your own map as whatever is connected to your local topology. And this is where we discussed yesterday about topology and why I think the rhizome applies. Everyone that's, let's say, in your house with you right now, you can go to them and you can ask a question. You can access their map to the capacity of your communication and whatever you can understand they say, right? And there's this map also for your neighbors. I don't know what whoever, you can even pick up your phone and ask a question, and you know that the person is actually accessing their map. And there's a map that's collective for the humanity in their channels and institutions also. And I think this map, it does exist, if that's what's your question, and it's structured semiotically. And at one point in all its grammars, there's this bottleneck that if a human needs to think about this, it will involve 7 plus or minus 7 elements in that thing. Be it on a sentence, on a visual diagram, or whatever. Some human is gonna go work through it, and it needs to do some tasks through it. It will have to be reduced to 7 plus or minus 2 to reduce. That's all my point.
Right. No, and sorry to my question was ultimately rhetorical, because I've read enough Kant to be stuck on the fact that all we have is maps, right? But this, again, really regretting that I spent enough time trying to learn where we are that I can't use that as an excuse for being lost. But one of my professors when I was in school, he had this really fascinating idea that he would always throw at us, and he was obsessed with the word "as." He gave entire talks on the word "as," which made me, of course, love him, and everyone else hated him. But
as or as?
As, A-S. Okay. And so, of course, with an obsession with the word "as," he was obsessed with the simile, right? And he felt that there was a good reason to feel that it was more important than the metaphor, which is really not extremely common, right? People generally think that the metaphor is stronger than the simile. The reason that he would say that the simile is stronger than the metaphor, the reason that the word "as" is so important, is because it takes two things that are not in the same bucket, and you don't even say that they're in the same bucket, but you're able to say that these two buckets are the same, right? It produces this kind of this increased intensity for an idea because of the difference that's contained inside of it, right?
And it instantly creates a category, right?
I'm sorry?
If you have, it instantly creates a category. The moment you have these two things, there's already one bucket by this as thing, if you accept the comparison to be true, correct?
Right, right. And then there's, to bring in another thought, and then I think those two thoughts will enter into a dialogue, and then I can sit back for a while again. But when you're dealing with schizophrenics, and this is just what I hear from psychologists, I'm not trained in psychology, but when you're dealing with schizophrenics, one of the things that you notice is that they have an over-concretization of thought, right? They have a difficulty, excuse me, in thinking abstractly. They have a difficulty in thinking metaphorically because, well, I'm not entirely sure why, right? But one of the things that ends up telling me is that when you're dealing with someone like a schizophrenic, and when you're dealing with something like schizoanalysis on, you know, the most abstract, ironically, level, you are dealing with a situation where instead of saying that things are similar to other things, but we know that they're not, right? Thinking in the abstract, we are thinking that when two things are similar, they're in fact the same. One of the tests that's used for schizophrenics is this allegory test, where you end up asking them, when you think of the phrase, when a rolling stone catches no moss, what does that mean? And most people will say, well, it means that if you're like changing through life and whatnot, then you know, you don't collect friends, you also don't collect habits. But then a schizophrenic will just tell you, well, when a stone is moving, moss can't grow up. And they'll respond to allegories in that way. And I think one of the reasons for that, when we're thinking in this kind of framework, is that when we're thinking in a schizoanalytic or a schizophrenic way, we're understanding that while all the buckets are different, all the buckets are integrally linked and in fact the same thing. We're willing to jump between buckets and combining them. And if we know anything about combination, combination leads us to a multiplicity of potential states, right? So 7 buckets or not, that in fact means that there's at least 49, right? It's just, there's an infinite array of buckets. Did I say something stupid like I thought I was going to? Or am I very smart?
No, yeah, you're very smart, man. I think what you said totally makes sense. And schizophrenia is one of the, I wouldn't say coolest disease. I don't want to sound like I'm glorifying something that is actually a very bad condition. But it really shows some weird things in the brain. Like there's a few studies that surprised me about schizophrenia. One of them said that people who are born blind, they cannot have schizophrenia. There's not a diagnosed case of someone that was born blind and had schizophrenia. If you become blind, eventually there's a different thing. But if you're born blind, you cannot have schizophrenia. And why that's I don't really know, but certainly it has to do something with the visual cortex or the processing of things. But there's another one that studied schizophrenia called Across Cultures, and it says that in the Eastern societies, like I don't know exactly where it was, but some Asian countries where you have a higher sense of community, the hallucinations would be generally good vibing you up. So like instead of being that schizoparanoid where it's saying I want to kill you, I hate you, or whatever, etc., they were being supportive. So like, hey, I don't really know the exact examples, but they made this difference between North America and this other culture, and they showed that whatever they were getting from this hallucinations were completely like opposites. And wow, this does make sense with what you're saying. If they are sort of materializing these buckets, they cannot say this is a thing. Maybe they're materializing some part of like the other, right? So how do they feel that they are included, and they are listening this signal through some sensory thing? This is one of the ways I think it could happen, but then again, no one really knows. It's just crazy to think how do we even set, okay, this is schizophrenia if it's such a wild cut of what's happening in the brain. And do you know other tests for schizophrenia? I did not know this one. Is this one used currently where you ask for metaphors? Like, is this part of the DSM thing? Do you know?
I have simply heard this in lectures on cognition. They were pretty recent, so I am under the impression that they're recent, but I know very little about psychology myself, so I can't really say.
Go ahead.
So I'd just like to draw this sort of back in sort of the D&G framework in some sense, or in the sense that I take it, is that when D&G are talking about schizophrenics or the schizos, the schizoanalysis, they're not talking about clinical cases. They're not talking about diagnostic schizophrenia. And I think that they make that, as far as they're clear about stuff when they're writing together, they're both clearer on their own, I think, but I think they make it relatively clear that, they're not talking about clinical schizophrenia. They're not talking about descriptive science. When they're talking about, when they're using terms from geology or physics or calculus, like Deleuze on his own writing about calculus, I think, as far as I understand, is writing about math. Deleuze with Guattari writing about math, it is like, as much as they say the metaphor is the enemy because it's related to the arch enemy, the signifier, they are doing they are doing something either allegorical or metaphorical, or possibly embarking on metonymy or synecdoche, but they're not. They're in no way talking about these descriptive, clinical, and like processes. And a difficulty here that might arise is that Deleuze, as I'm a transcendental empiricist. Well, what do we relate empiricism to? Well, the scientific method. I don't think that theory, capital T theory, is interested in replicating the sciences or making itself a science in the sense of the royal sciences that we encounter in ATP, like the critique of this, like axiomatic sciences that give us these definitive rules, and possibly more scary to D&G, descriptions, real descriptions of actual processes and, you know, small e events in the world. So when we're talking about, you know, all of this like scientifically, which is massively interesting, but I don't think that it's attached to what theory is trying to do. I think theory, like, which again, like, but they're clearly working from, you know, you know, I think, was it in like what's that book, Brickmore and Setareh wrote, you know, in Fashionable Nonsense, you know, basically these men have vast erudition and incredibly shallow depths. But they're at least aware of the literature. But I don't think it's not important to them to attach themselves to any like empirical or statistical evidence.
Yeah, and let me kind of
working against it.
Let me kind of clarify kind of where I'm coming from with bringing in, like, you know, clinical science or whatnot. Is that, I mean, I'm not going to say that we would, nor would Deleuze and Guattari ever want to like diagnose a text, right? Like we don't want to look at the checklist of like borderline personality disorder and then use that as a way to produce a new, you know, model of thought. But I do think that a lot of these descriptions inside of something like a clinical space can be used as, of course, spaces to jump off of, right? These stratum, whether or not they are real, are still spaces for movement. And so I think that something like saying, well, in schizophrenics, things are, you know, hyperconcretized, I think still does work and is part of why they came up with this theory in the first place, right? Because, of course, they're not talking about it in a clinical sense, but they learned about it through a clinical sense, right? Like, like Laborde existed.
Right? Yeah, just one question. So why do you think they use this schizo? If you were just like, when they take the word schizo and they use that, and there's these two different things, what exactly of essence from schizo do you really feel they wanted to? Can you clarify to me a bit? Because I'm not.
Wouldn't it be from the etymology? You know, like when you studied, like, you know, when you studied philosophy until, you know, relatively recently, you were taking Latin and Greek.
Right.
You know, it's from the etymology of break and head, I think. So you know, it's about break. It's about the, because, you know, what are D&G all about? You know, the break. You know, it's the break. But and this is you know, and I'm riffing here because I don't know this is exactly what I'm saying, but I'm linking this back to the reading that we, you know, the face. You know, we move from the head body system to the face system. So I think, you know, so they quite like the head body system because it's not organized. You know, the face for them is an organ. And when you read, say, Deleuze on his own writing in Francis Bacon, he discusses the difference between, you know, I think, you know, I forget if it's a skull or the head, but it's like it's unformed meat is the head. This is preferable. You know, it's much more expressive. You get the horror, not what's being screamed out. There's no reason. We just have this expression. And they really like that, I think. They find it to be powerful because it's not organized. You know, you want to say like, it sounds massively contradictory to say maybe what we might think of as an empirical method, but they're also like they're trying to break from these systems of interpretation, I think. So, you know, this schizoanalysis is, you know, it's the analysis of the break. We're interested in the break. We're not interested in, you know, the apparent opposite being psychoanalysis. We're not interested in like from Greek again, psyche, you know, it's being soul or mind. Now, a soul or a mind tends to be seen as, you know, not just a unifying property, but it's always this majoritarian property where you say, you know, it's the soul of man. You know, we're in the image of the creator or something. Whereas D&G, I think, like, yeah, that sounds like a bunch of repressive bullshit. What about the break as the origin rather than the image as the origin? And I think you see that in the, like, I'm desperately trying to bring this back to the chapters, but I think this is an easy enough one, you know, to say, you know, we don't like we don't like the image of thought as the world tree's origin. We like the break as the origin from which we got the world tree, but it's contingent. Our powers could have went in any other number of directions, even given determinism. You can get determinism via, and I think this is in Guattari. How do you say Guattari?
I'm probably full of shit. So
also, I'm vastly aware of my terrible Antipodian accent. So,
my California, it's I think we're both cursed here. Yeah.
It's like hanging out with people on TV for me, really. So there's this, yeah. So they have the break, and they're massively interested in the break in so many different ways. And the break is never an image. Okay, it's not a crack in the image. It's sorry, what I wanted to say. So when Guattari seems to be much more clear on this by himself, I think, chaos is a determination just as much as as order is. So it could have been otherwise. And and then we bring back in a transcendental read, which would be to say, what are the conditions from which this emerged, which isn't to prop them up. It's describe it, and then to find the lines that crossed through there or remained virtual, and then engage with those virtual lines. Now, again, like I keep bringing myself back to the abstract, these unrealized machines, because I think descriptively what both Victor and Dorian have talked about is just what's real, but it's real in the sense of the symbolic order, and it's real in the sense of the possible. It has, to me, nothing to do with the virtual at all. Now, I'm clearly like riding my tiny little like sputtering war machine through here and trying to make sense, but like I'm not arguing against the descriptions. I'm just in some sense I'm talking about desires. Getting hung up on what is always
just talking about
let me just
okay, sorry.
If I can, please. Thanks. No, again, I guess as literary critics, as scientists, as people in a workshop, we want to know what this means, why they said this. But I mean, in keeping to the spirit of D&G, and I know they said this kind of glibly and maybe tongue in cheek, but let me just something from Letter to a Harsh Critic, and allow me to just read this for a second. That's why we said that in principle, at least, this book is written for 15 to 20-year-olds. There you see there are two ways of reading a book. You either see it as a box with something inside and start looking for it and see what it signifies, and then you see if there's even more perverse or depraved signifiers to set you off. And next you treat the book like a box contained in the first or containing it, and you annotate it and interpret it and question it and write a book about the book and so on. And then there's another way, and this is, again, in the spirit, at least, what we try to do when we make silly memes. You see the books as a little non-signifying machine, and the only question is, does it work? How does it work? How does it work for you? If it doesn't work, if nothing comes through, you try another book. The second way of reading is intensive. Something comes through or it doesn't. There's nothing to explain, nothing to understand, nothing to interpret. It's like plugging into an electric circuit, and so on. Anyway, I love that passage, and whenever somebody asks me to explain Deleuze to them, I just kind of point them to this. But
right, yeah, that makes me think really quickly about how sad I tend to feel for people that didn't have the opportunity of being a teenager that liked philosophy. Because while it might be socially excluding, it gives you such opportunities to read things hysterically, right? And to experience them in their full intensities and completeness. I was, of course, as is necessary when being one of those people, the worst person in the world as I was reading Nietzsche, and I was like 16, 17. I read Thus Spake Zarathustra around then, and it turned me into a little monster. But that's also the exact right time to read something like that, right? When you yourself are an unstable quantity and you are plugging yourself into other unstable quantities and trying to find some kind of a unifying intensity or a flow that equalizes things a little bit. The flux cup flow break, just everything constantly moving between these, and that's to bring it back into the memes and everything. As I think you were doing beyond this idea of taking things very seriously by not taking them literally and not taking them seriously and not taking them too concretely is such a fantastic opportunity for people that missed out on being an immature philosopher to experience immature philosophy in a way that I think is, excuse me, actually extremely rewarding and extremely important as someone who's walking through philosophy. Because and this is the most trite thing you can say about it, but I think people miss it after a certain point. But philosophy is supposed to be about breaking things, right? It's asking questions. It's a nomad science, right? You're moving, you're problematizing. You're not always supposed to be making things work. And I think especially when we're plugging in politics and the ideologies in that space. I mean, everything's political, whatever. But as we plug in more Marx and Hobbes and everyone into this space, we begin to forget yet again that it's supposed to be self-problematizing. And so I think that theorygram's actually very important because we make poop jokes.
Do you want to leave it there then? Like, that's a good
Yeah,
way.
all right. Good podcast. Oh, I should have ended with a question. That's what you're supposed to do.
So I guess like this sort of raises the thing. I guess like if we want to explicit, like I think Woke and Dorian have both sort of started to bring this back to memes after, I can always, I love just arguing theory forever, and it would be easy for me to do that and waste everyone's time here. But we've come here for memes in some sense. So, the question of politics just came up there. So, if everything is political, so how do we describe, again, like bringing up these vile things like definite. Let's do concept analysis because we're analytic philosophers, everyone. What is politics or a politics, Dorian? Or anyone?
God, it's what would it be, like externalized philosophy? It's philosophy of the polis, right? I don't know. That's all I got.
Yeah. So like, I would just like my like dumb thing that I say in this. I said this to someone and they said, "Oh, it sounds what did they say? They said it sounds very bleak, and they're conservative." So, but I said, politics has nothing to do with democracy, and it's all to do with the distribution of powers within a social field. Now,
Right.
I can see why that would scare a conservative, maybe. But we take this seriously. Like, are memes anti-democratic? Are they political? And like, do they distribute powers in the social field? Because, and when I talk about powers, of course, powers are going to be the thing. Like I'm this like dumb shit Spinoza, like everything filtered by Deleuze, but I'm this dumb shit Spinoza, and I think, well, it's all that power is the increase or decrease in my capacity to affect and be affected. So, because maybe are memes stultifying our politics? Are we devoting too much of a libido here? Or are they, or is this meme magic thing a thing? And also, why doesn't it work for, ANCOMs in the way that it works for dumb shit, center to far right people? Sorry, and apologies to any dumb shit center to far right people here.
I mean, yeah, that's.
That's a dumb shit question too.
I think that memes are anti-democratic in the same sense that democracy is anti-democratic. that it will always try to sell itself out and then try to construct itself in a way that is best for replicating something in a very simple way. And so the more that we can unify and forget it is really what it's constantly aiming for, but never quite reaching that endpoint. I would also like to repair my answer and steal an answer from someone else, though I do forget who said it. I'm sure someone knows, but politics is just war by other means. There you go. Yeah, I mean, I do oftentimes feel like all forms of media that are having anything to do with political signification are stultifying and kind of poisoning something like politics, because it gives us an outlet other than doing. But I refuse to admit that that's the case for now. And I want someone to tell me why.
Well, so something that I might respond to that. So, you know, because I'm not just a dumb shit Deleuze or Spinozian.
You're not.
I'm a dumb shit Deleuzean Lovecraftian. So and so now let's Lovecraft is highly memeable, and
Yeah.
he became a meme, you know, after death. But he was also, Houellebecq's analysis of Lovecraft was no one seriously considered continuing Proust, but they did Lovecraft. That's important. Like Lovecraft. So my interpretation is Lovecraft is a meme. Now, part of Lovecraft's message, like not message, but you know, he's a cosmic nihilist. He's I think there's obligatory. Oh, he's problematic. He's a racist. He's all these fucking terrible things. In some letters to another author, I think who was Frank Belknap, he said something along the lines of, I was wrong before. My political views were dumb. The sort of Victorian or Georgian, structure of distribution of wealth is awful. What I suggest is an aristocratic socialism. He wrote a critique of orthodox Marxism, and so there's this interesting thing. So let people who are fantastic at what they do be fantastic at what they do. That's not democratic at all. But he also said, we need to increase people's capacity to live their own lives, which is actually, that seems massively democratic. And so I wonder if memes have any sense of allowing us to live our own lives, but only in this very limited space that we've constructed. We're constructing these new ways of being, this reminds me of Call of Cthulhu when they say, and when the great ones return, we will be free and wild. We'll learn new ways to hunt and kill and frolic and be free and wild and beyond good and evil. Lovecraft's a bad reader of Nietzsche, but there's like something just in beyond, even in Beyond Work's name, Work Beyond's name, I think we are doing this. You can now, as we were sort of talking in the earliest part of the chat, Work Beyond is like catches shit, just in the microcosm of their relatively large reach for posting funny Russian man, haha shit. But that's a world of power and creation that they get to access. Now, I think that's political, and it's aristocratic because Work Beyond is the expert. They control the domain. Clearly, Instagram could shut any of us down, but we get to own these things and extend our power. Now, if we say this isn't really doing something, I think that's a bad analysis. I think this is the level of analysis you get on Chapo fucking Trap House. What do you think? Oh, this isn't
our nemesis.
Politics is when you do good vote for Bernie or some shit and support Ilhan Omar. And I feel weird talking about this because of where I live. But it's also being the working class is only when you are a man that has truck and lifts shit or bricks.
The only people in the working class own ski-doo dealerships. That's it. That's the working class. Sorry.
No. Well, wait. I feel like I've just been completely shut down.
Oh, I fucked you up.
No. So I think there is something politically, but again, this is this inkling towards a politics to come, much like the text to come. We're not there yet. We don't own the means of I think means of production. What do we do now? We produce affect and distribution. we don't own that yet. We are regulated, but a lot of the time we slip through, and we bring about, there a lot of my politics over the last, say, 10, I'm old as shit, but a lot of my politics over the last 10 years are a direct result of influence. Like, politics is a distribution of power. Now, I take this seriously. Not that knowledge is power. Affect is power. My affect has been altered, increased, decreased, warped by all of this. And again, like, I sound so hopeful about what memes can do. I know it's all dog shit. Like, we're going to burn to death. My country doesn't think that climate change exists. It's as we live in, we already lived in an oven. But I think these things are deeply political. And when we, like, if we reduce it to bureaucratic democracy, it's a really false thing. And we don't need to be like massive edgelords, even though maybe some of us are. I think I'm too old and stupid to be edgy, but I think these things are important. And to draw along the lines of I think both metonymy and synecdoche, what's an edge? Well, we're talking about swords here. So we're the Ides of March, dickheads. We're theorygram. Sorry, that's
right.
Now we'll cut it.
No, I love that that politics is, well, you said it better, but politics is affect, or affect affects politics, rather than just knowledge. It just makes me think of the Iliad, right? The way that we step into and define war is sing muse the rage of Achilles, right? Like, it's about rage. It's about that affect made multiple and flowing through the space, rather than just like, well, let me tell you a little bit about the causes of this war. And of course they get around to that, but the important thing isn't the cause or the details or logistics. It's the fact that there's rage. And to some degree, like, the so many of the memes that I end up posting, and I mentioned this yesterday, is it's a good comment from Mike, but it happens in these moments of extremized affect trying to just kind of make itself known, but then I generally end up just kind of forgetting what I end up putting out anyway. And so it's affect having its own kind of life, as these aesthetic little squares, rather than in my own. And that's where it becomes bizarre for me, because I feel like it, in a way, though I'm constantly talking about and posting about politics, it erases part of it from my life, but it pushes that upon everyone else. So I'm putting more politics in everyone else's life by forgetting it in my own, at least at a moment of making a meme and casting it off to sea and forgetting it ever existed. Yeah, sorry, that was also a little wandering, windy.
So that sort of provoked something in me, because like I was sort of asking some students in a final year class the other day, what's the what is sort of, how does reading James Joyce show us the importance of art as opposed to something else, as far as expression or knowledge goes. And so, like, when you say this, like, are memes, is there something in particular to memes that's important that doesn't arrive in other ways of messaging? Because, like, just as far as Dorian goes, and like, maybe Deebs is the guilty ringleader here, but you have a podcast that Benzo Rehab Dungeon, everyone check it out. It's my favorite pod, but it's deeply, it's political, and it's descriptive, but also it's descriptive, analytic, and also I say, it creates lines from the descriptive. You go off into other places. Are memes doing something other than this kind of discourse? Like, are memes a discourse like that? Are they related to it, or are they doing something important, or are they just, or are we stultifying ourselves? Have we become that Nietzschean The Last Man, I just smile and drool and, play the, the Skyrim mod for Morrowind and just die. We're doing something different.
Oh man.
Like, okay, so okay, here's a big and ridiculous question. What do you want out of all this, man?
Right.
Tell me. I mean, we're talking desires.
Yeah. I mean, the desire that I want out of it is already something that I've kind of attained, and that explains a little bit of why I'm kind of bored posting memes now, a little bit, to be entirely honest. Though I'll continue doing it until part of my brain breaks. But it's the desire that I had with it would be simply that someone would want to listen to it. Like, I only made the meme looking for an audience, right? I was sharing these things that originally with people that I knew personally, and like I said, their eyes would glaze over. And so I was like, well, I'll just put a little pocket into the internet here, and I'll just put memes into it about theory, and still no one will look at it, but at least no one will be irritated. And then suddenly I had an audience. So people listened at some point. And so I got what I wanted, and now I'm miserable.
Were you already miserable?
Yes, of course. Just that little A object just keeps on evading me somehow. But I mean, of course, the loftier answer is that, like, I would want this to influence people's politics and philosophy. And I think that to some degree it does. I do get a lot of people sending me messages, at least saying like, oh, I read that book that you referenced. And then that I feel like I made this huge influence on the world, but also how much does that change? I don't know. So I feel both that these memes are very important and also probably take up way too much of our time. It's or mine at least. But yeah, I don't know. Woke, what the fuck do you want out of this?
That's a good question. I mean, an outlet for, the garbage that swirls around in my head. But I don't know. It's kind of like just, the response, dopamine hit, share. I mean, it really has like rewired my brain for better or worse. But no, I mean, the power to affect, and also yeah, I don't know. I don't really have like an end, but maybe increasing my clout to toss, if you will. But yeah, no, I don't know. A lot of people have like a podcast or a book or, something in mind. I just do it for the lulz, I guess.
A noble goal.
I wish it was deeper than that, but
well, the lulz are one of those, I think as far as Spinoza would think in the age of memes, this is one of those, positive passions. It's an extension in intensity. So, and I think, if we just look at now, I think we're sort of theorizing memes and maybe also we're verging on psychoanalysis maybe, but there's this idea, I'm thinking about like the early sort of blogosphere and how, say, things like speculative realism, OOO, etc., took off there. And I know that there are D&G studies inside of that. Certainly, D&G have, fans inside of speculative realism. Well, I'm broadly sort of thinking of, Nick Land, and I think it was Robin McKay maybe who wrote something like this, and I might be misattributing, but it was someone close to Land who said, Land leaving academia to blog is a practical accelerationism, because you no longer, it takes so long to publish an academic paper, so long to get a critique back, to get reviewed, and then to have someone respond to you in a journal can take years and years. So Land maybe moving into blogging, and whether or not, like, whatever we might think about Land the blogger, and Twitter. But like, are we doing something different from that blogging culture? Like, and yeah, so did God, this is yeah, I won't even go with that. Yeah, so yeah, is this separable from, is this the same as or separable from the blogging culture that sort of developed around things like, you know, what did like Brazzy called it, like something like, you know, an online orgy of stupidity, because like we embrace that stupidity and he seemed to think that it was a negative judgment. We're like, no, we're fucking idiots.
Yeah. Transcendental stupidity. I mean, that is like a Deleuzean concept that, again, I'm not sure if I have like 100% grasp on. Something I read in Difference in Repetition, and it sounded cool, and like that's gonna be my aesthetic from now. That's gonna be my my vibe from now on. And but yeah, I kind of, I mean, I think he meant stupidity in a more negative sense, but I do see it as kind of like the fool jester like character, you know. But yeah, so again, stupidity in itself for me is like not a bad word, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's fundamental to Deleuze. Like as you say, like in Difference and Repetition, it seems like, you know, stupidity is the only way that we get to approach what we might call philosophy, like what we might call philosophy. You know, and then when he gets, you know, the best sequel ever, you know, Logic of Sense, when the whole point of sense is that nonsense is required, not dialectically. You know, we need Alice in Wonderland to disturb us with its fucking psychedelia before we can even begin to think. You know, so we don't wait for truth to be uncovered, as in Heidegger. We don't encounter the event pre-given. We encounter this rampant stupidity, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. And, you know, maybe but memes, you know, I feel like in some sense, you know, it might sound like a good rallying cry, but I'm not sure if that's the way we're really engaging in it. Like, this is dumb and funny is different from, I'm stupefied by this, which is very much like the Kantian sublime. It's just, I feel like, you know, because Deleuze is super Kantian, at least in those first two books. In D&R and Logic of Sense. You know, knowledge as the sublime. Now, the sublime is not knowable. So that's wild. I really, really like that. This brings back to, like, you know, but the meme always must be knowable in some sense, or we create fields of knowing, or do we create fields of unknowing? Sorry, I feel like I've taken over all the questioning here, so I'll lay back a little.
I think that's good. I mean, so just bringing in this knowing and unknowing in a really kind of direct, concrete way when it comes to memes. Two types of memes seem to work the best, right? There's the one that combines a lot of signifiers that are very clear to everyone and they get it. Like one of my most popular ones in that sense would be, I took The Will to Power by Nietzsche and then I turned its title into something shitting on Jordan Peterson. And it's like, everyone gets it. It's kind of funny. Okay. It makes sense. It in fact makes too much sense. And then the other ones that are most successful are just like unrelated image, insane phrase. There's a vibe that kind of fits, but mostly it's just nonsense. And so there's this constant process in making these where you're making, you're looking for either an excess of sense or an excess of nonsense, and both of them lead us to the same kind of trajectories of like movement and the flows and the way that they're shared. Not sure where I'm going with that, but I think that's curious.
Yeah, in a sense, like the first meme is, you know, it's full of signification. I would fall into what does a meme mean, whereas the other one is more generative. You're saying, you know, it's kind of going all over the place, going on its own line of flights, depending on where you are as the audience in relation to it. I guess I guess that'd be more true, like to the second way of reading book, and we can apply it to memes, but according to D&G in this letter from negotiations. Does anybody else have anything to add on that to that?
Tom, we can barely hear you, or I can barely hear you. If I listen very carefully, I think I might be able to pick up what you're saying.
I don't understand technology or what happened
Oh,
to my mind.
Much better, suddenly.
Okay, so Deleuze like distinguishes between like flows of intelligence and flows of stupidity and anti-Oedipus. He says like they often like coincide in the same people, but like he doesn't. This isn't like a positive thing, and I don't really think like the sense. I think it's the similarity in logic of sense is more the like it's more like the ability to sense outside, like sensing outside of logic, more so like a trained like perception of affect, the idea of a seer, like micro perception, into like the training your intuition, like the structure of one's intuition and like what that allows people to be able to perceive, like elegance and the ability to perceive signs and signals. I think is like I think there is like a sense it's not anti-rational, non-rational, and kind of elevating that to like a higher level while kind of like lowering the relevance of I'm mixing up inductive and deductive logic. Like lowering the capacity of or the ability of like universals to determine truth, and like lowering like the ability of dialectics to show you truth, but like elevating the status of intuition. I feel like those are the like sense operations engaging in. That makes sense.
Oh, sorry, no, I thought we lost you for a second. You just went black.
Oh, did I? Did I fall in my background or something?
You just look like a Samuel Beckett play.
Fell into loss. Yeah. Does anyone have comments on that?
So sorry. So the elevation of intuition. That's
Yeah, I think like the passage in A Thousand Plateaus of like the micropolitics of the farseers and like the perception of like microfragmentation and like between like molecular and molar perception is like a lot of I think it all connects together with like an idea of Bergson of like of the it's instead of like what can I know for certain, like certainly there's an idea of like what could I possibly know, and like the ability of like intuition to have a very high capacity for accuracy if it's like well tuned. And I feel like there's more of a tendency in like I guess the like maybe Hegelian or German philosophy or like Descartes or something of like what can of certainty, like what can I know for certain, and like I think it Deleuze is often going for a different concept of like what could I possibly know, like what is the greatest extent of my possible perception, and like being more curious about that than the other pole, which is going to mean like very weird like trigger response mechanisms and like and a very wide variety of like who can perceive what signal where, and just the like sheer multitude of like potential capacities for perception and affect are going to vary between people. I don't know. I need to think of like an example from logic of sense. I'm just thinking of like the difference between like flows of intelligence and flows of stupidity, and like distinguishing that they're like different flows, and that you can be caught up in both simultaneously. And like I thought of Deleuze more so as like advocating like an exiting of the flows of stupidity as something like don't watch TV or something. Like he seems like have a big thing of like hating television and like a certain passage from like anti-Oedipus.
Yeah, so do you, in some sense, I think that it's I don't want to be impute reasons here, but and I vaguely remember this too, but it just reminded me Adorno hating jazz or some shit like that. Is it a misreading of the potential, a misreading of the potential of the medium rather than the possibility of the medium, which seems that something that and this is also like my read of Deleuze and putting Deleuze back on Deleuze, because I do take the flows of stupidity, but it seems that the flows of stupidity are always when you say that they're within the same subject something, well, they're necessarily crossing each other. Like it's own like these form like don't they form new territories? Like to think the molar perception would be a flow of intelligence. Say I have this maybe a Cartesian mastery of my subjecthood, but the stupidity is a disturbance of this in some way, which is always a provocation of recognition of desire. Like I feel like I'm interpolating, I'm interpolating or combining ATP and molecular and molar stuff with logic of sense, and I don't think they're written for the same purposes.
With what you're telling, this what you're describing is actually one of the mechanisms that we use to train machine learning. There are a few methods that actually have a good success in making a machine learning better, which is either killing some neurons. So when you kind of solve the problem for a certain situation, you deactivate some neurons so that it has to come up with a new way to solve the same problem using other neurons, and this generates a generalization or a plasticity. And there's also some noise that you add to things to sort of make the capacity to generalize greater. So even if you're not going for that, I can tell that there's an analogous that is very real for what you're saying, at least in the entropy of information that we really have been testing very well lately. So this idea of you have to have this stupidity, you have to have noise to actually generalize, because you can never show all the examples of something to train, let's say, an AI, right? You can never show all possible examples. You want it to generalize, so it needs to be stupid in a certain way. It needs to assume that some things it has never seen might fall within that class, right? And that's a stupidity that actually increases the fitness for whatever you're doing. But just to add that at least I see what you mean in this very practical sense. It has an instance that happens in the real world.
I wonder, like, if it's similar to like the talk about like involution and simplification, just like just applied to like information, because they seem to be like, the back doors of non-communication. We're flooding in communication, too much information. It seemed like a theme in like societies of control. And I felt like there's almost something optimistic though, where it's like, well, instead of like saying to everyone, you're stupid because you don't take in enough information, I feel like the idea of stupidity is coming from a surplus of information is kind of interesting. Like stupidity as like a learned thing instead of an excess, not a lack.
Yeah. So do you think that it all relates possibly to when they talk about really what language does, or what structures of communication are always actually against communication, other than the fact that they're about the power of dictation or command. They categorize, direct, and exercise power on you. They don't explain anything to you. So, you know, the problem of an excess of information would, in the way that it maybe stupefies, you know, in a negative sense, could be that you're given a series of contradictory commands which you can't possibly follow, which increases control in some sense. Like, yeah, so I think there's like a few things going on in that, like, and I might be misreading like what everyone's saying, but yeah, it does strike me that, you know, the information that is being talked about here is structured by the fact that it references something else, and that referencing to something else is something you should do. It's not giving you anything about what could happen, it's telling you what should happen. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm picking up what you're laying down.
I keep turning over in my head this this noise to make generalization more efficient idea, and I really want to do something more with it, but I'm also still turning it over. So yeah.
To make what? Sorry, generalization?
Well, yeah, to make generalization more efficient, right? Like that's what you were saying about that. You increase noise in order to make it easier to generalize.
Yeah, so the term that you use for
That's
a
cool.
stupid network is when you had an overfitted network. So this example, for example, imagine an AI where you showed several categories of images of cats, and it thinks that a cat is only something it saw exactly in that image. You don't want that from an AI. So you want it to be able to extrapolate and to get some identifiers of what makes a cat cat.
First, it's like silhouette of cat, and then it's
exactly. And for if it's an image, let's say if you're dealing with image processing and all, I don't know, natural language or something else, there's a translation to the visual, to the semantic sort of, because you need it's pixels. It's a digital representation of an image, and you know. What's the minimum size, for instance, where you think you could do a meme and still be readable, right? So that kind of defines for any meme the sort of what's the minimum form of representation that it can have. But for an AI that classifies memes, and there's actually a really good example for this. There's a project from a guy that was about clustering memes. So imagine like you have these formats and you have a huge set of memes you drain from somewhere, to try to identify memes that could have been the same format. And it all boils down to what it feels is the most visually efficient way to classify things. So it could be that it finds that all memes that come from that bottom text format, it will just learn to find, oh, there's a big black box under. It doesn't really know what it is, but it's going to find this big black box in a lot of things, and it's going to add some meaning to that. And if you're not careful with the data you're giving it to train, you might fool yourself to think it's actually thinking something much more sophisticated. When you given it some data to generalize that is biased, and it learned to identify this black box. So you're like, oh, wow, this thing's amazing. It always finds memes from Twitter, but you don't realize that it's because you're putting in the background that's white or gray, and it's just learning to know when there's a certain amount of gray in the image. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Right. No, that makes sense.
I even have to find this one here. There's a project, and anyone that has a minimum sort of experience, you can try to tell this. If you have a folder of 10,000 memes or whatever, you can run and see what weird patterns it finds between the memes you have saved. And it's all, I think this version is based on one of the Google's neural networks. So it's that one who was trained over images of cats, boats, whatever. There's a number of
like
objects.
Deep Dream or something like that.
Yeah, it's one of the engines that is used for this, but ResNet, I think, is the name of this one. But it basically they are really like frozen brains in a very neuromancer sense, because someone trained them on a very huge task with millions of images and saved the exact image of how its visual cortex is to do this task well. And it can serve as a good seed for training new neural networks. So you can use this visual cortex that was trained, and you can plug into other tasks that are not necessarily used. In this case, the person uses to cluster memes, not because he knows about memes, but because and on some of its neural layers, it has a good space of representation for visual features, like edges, colors, some weird things, like it can recognize faces. That's something that it does. The face is a very important structure inside of this network, because faces are in many of the tasks we want to use image to recognize. So it has its weird way of representing faces, and it, yeah, got to that. And it's a bit creepy when you look at the things it finds similar. It's one of the things that make me more scared of AI when you really go into studying these things.
Skynet.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Skynet.
More sort of Roku basilisk wise.
Why'd you have to tell him?
Yeah, I don't really know if this is something that some people might be mad if you mention, but like, sorry. Some people can get offended in some circles if you mention this sort of discussion. So I apologize. Yeah, but no one really asked what if he's a good guy. Why does everyone think he's gonna be a bad guy and not good AI? I don't know why that's assumption.
I'm kind of worried about like the Screamers scenario, maybe. You know this movie?
I'm not familiar. Screamers?
No.
Oh, I think it was like 1994. It was like robots, self-replicating robots that kill humans, evolve into humans, and then they're destroying all the humans.
Okay,
95.
So it's like a von Neumann machine that that uses flesh.
Something like the infinite paperclip problem.
Right.
But like, yeah, self-replicating robots that are I don't know, that end up violent for some reason. I don't know, like Asimov has his own ideas on this. I feel like Skynet's scary enough. The Roko's Basilisk scenario, I'm like more critical of thinking that there will be like true AI, but I can see like, yeah, I don't know, like a program error, kill all humans AI, definitely.
I think there's definitely the anthropomorphizing of AI makes it scarier for people that don't think hard enough about it. And that we already have kind of a non-anthropomorphized actual AI forming just through like how the algorithm ends up shuffling people around and everything, that we're going to have to deal with something that's more foreign and probably also worse and probably also here. Yeah, the Skynet thing, not so worried about it, but what's that?
Turtle Island will survive.
Yeah, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, I gotta move to the woods and just become primitive. Shoot down from.
Sorry.
No, I was making a silly joke. Continue.
No, let's imagine a horrible future, right?
No way.
And
impossible.
And this horrible future is a space where everyone is enslaved by their own neurochemical feedback loops, informed by an algorithm that continues to make that more efficient and extremizes their addiction to their own feedback loops. And like, just imagine how scary it would be if we were all caged in by the invisible walls of an AI like that.
What is end goal? Like what is getting from it?
Clicks. It gets clicks.
You're being very rude and scary right now.
Yeah. It would be crazy if that was happening. Yeah. So that's fun.
Like it's funny, like the perception of like accelerationism is like so technophilic, and like sometimes like Mark Fisher and Ted Kaczynski are like indistinguishable, or like I think like like Mark Fisher was like writing like we're basically like the appropriated sex organ slaves of machines at this point, that they reproduce through us, and
Right.
like I'm like, oh my god, or just I don't know. It was too much, but like I think like relationships between species tend towards symbiosis over time. So just give it some time, and it'll all be cool.
So really, so we're talking about lemurs, really.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm already against the next Lemurian time war.
It's too late.
I mean, they tend towards symbiosis in the cases in which that relationship is efficient enough to not make one of them extinct to begin with, right? So yeah, it'll eventually work out so long as it works out. That seems to be one of the rules in this. Nature finds a way. Either you are extinct or you find a way. It's kind of a little too close to a tautology, but
life will survive. But the living die. Life does not die.
Right.
So yeah, might not be human. Like I mean, the only thing is like I feel like Nick Land gets this, is just cool with it.
Yeah. No, he's a cosmic libertarian that really wants like the techno daddy to take over from the future.
No, I hate to I hate and love that this has just come up. To call Nick Land a techno libertarian, it's pretty wild, because the whole I'm just going to straight up call it a doctrine. The doctrine of hyperstition is radically anti-libertarian. It's determinism. It's a eschatology of pure determinism. It was always going to happen. It's in some sense, the reason it's aesthetic is because when you're a very advanced, drug abusing intellectual, you begin to understand and see the crossovers of the future arriving, but it was always going to happen. Like it's only ever descriptive.
Right.
In this way, I've never worked out how to meme this. The joke being, Nick Land giving this talk, and then someone stands up and goes, some of us are still Marxists. Well, they probably say it in a cool British accent that I can't do. Marx he describes things. I'm not. I don't think he ever goes as far as saying this will happen. As far as extreme as Land does, but maybe that's just because what Marx sort of said will happen. It seems fairly prosaic to me compared to Land. In some sense, you can look into the future. Land is describing emergence. He has no sense of free will. His libertarianism is and this is something now I've just come here to shit on speculative realism and OOO. Really, I did a bit of Graham last night. I'll do Nick tonight. He's a crypto-humanist. He's still inside of all of this. He thinks there is this weird, and Lovecraft has this idea that I'm a cosmic determinist. The only thing that matters, even though it doesn't metaphysically or metaethically matter, and it can't be grounded, is the fact that I grew up with for Lovecraft, Anglo-Victorian values. And Land is in some at this point no fucking better, which is incredibly bizarre given when you read something like the first essay in Fang Numina, dude hates this world. Now it's no, he's desperately scared to lose this world, even though he knows it doesn't fucking matter and can't possibly continue.
Right.
So it's so awful because he talks a big libertarian game. You read you read Dark Enlightenment, and it takes forever, and you go this, and then you log on to Twitter and you go, holy shit, really? What what the fuck's going on? Sorry, I'm sorry. That's also like, this is polemical rather than analytic as well.
I would also, I would clarify my cosmic libertarianism concept in the sense that
because that did trigger me. That really triggered me.
I think that the way that I would understand him as a cosmic libertarian while also being a determinist would be that he sees humanity as being slowly eviscerated, and that he thinks it might be best to stop putting yourself through the pain of putting the organs back, and you should stop regulating this attempt to save the human so that it can just die like God and a dog, right? That was another little reference, but no, but so yeah, that's why I kind of view him as a libertarian, even though he is still yeah, he's still paradoxical, and he still is like, he loves the feeling of horror of being human because he wants to save the human because he hates the human. I think there is a paradox there, but yeah, in the sense that he's cosmically libertarian, I just think he wants to make it a more painless exit, right?
So this is interesting. So he did an interview, I think it was on Hermetics. So that was it like the whatever that whoever does that podcast, and he says, you know, sorry.
Oh, I think it's Meta Nomad.
Yeah, he posted the meta politics of space, politics of metaspatiality or whatever videos too. That dude,
Stephen Ellis, I think his name is. I have his book, but anyway, sorry, that's a digression. Please.
No. It's like good for me to know that. But so, you know, he says something along the lines, you know, I don't reject the rejection of capital on a local level. It just is. It's painful to see people thinking that there's any chance, you know, right, to move beyond this. You know, what he sees as a singularizing force, which still feels like, sorry, it still feels like a humanism to me. It's like, you know, yep, imagine like, you know, when Heidegger writes, you know, against Sartre and, you know, his letter on humanism, like, holy shit, you think that, you know, the Greeks and the ancient Greeks, you know, and cut that off where you want. I don't think he makes it clear, because there's a massive difference between, say, Hellenic Greek and classical and archaic Greek. And I've taken enough Greek classes to know, I have no idea about modern Greek. It's probably very cool. But yeah, like, you know, for Heidegger to say this, and Land seems to have these very similar ideas to Heidegger, in that there's a certain kind of thing that is the apotheosis. No, I think apotheosis is the wrong word, because I also want to say the apotheosis of human is the apotheosis of the machine. But Land can never ever get past that, and it's there in Fang Noumena, and it's rampantly fucking there in Outsideness. And, you know, I'm never going to call on a philosopher to be consistent. I don't give a shit about that. Like, right, it's not good for memes. It's not good for philosophy. But yeah, I don't see Land as, like, he hasn't escaped the human. Like, no. And it's not even paradoxical. He's just lying.
Right now, his turn to religion too is like very interesting, kind of harkening back to that. And I haven't really followed too much of his kind of quasi-Catholic discourse he has, but there's something there. Anyway.
Yeah, what can we parse out of that? I don't follow a whole lot of that either, per se. Do you, Luke?
No.
Damn, we're missing out on Catholic Land.
Should get Justin Murphy on here.
Let's do it.
Yeah, see, you know, when this originally was organized, I was kind of like, I was really hoping that he would somehow appear. Because, you know, it's fun for me to ship on Land and Harmon, but Murphy, yeah. Because there's nothing more memeable than Base Deleuze. No, and I feel rude because, you know, Justin Murphy would probably beat me up because he's totally alpha, blah blah blah.
I don't know, like I was like upset with Justin Murphy for like not understanding hyper racism, but I didn't know who to complain about that to. It was like I don't know, but like yeah, he used the term like he was talking about like the nomos. He was talking about like nomos as law, and I'm like, no, it's the total opposites. The dichotomies nomos and logos, like in 1,000 Plateaus. What are you talking about? Like, I don't know. I didn't like. I listened to one interview with them. I didn't feel like he got into Catholicism. I know like he like Nick Land was like, oh, like Marxism is eschatology, and they just like want the end of the world, and it's going to be. I don't know. It's like it just mimics the Christian apocalypse. But it's like I don't know. I know like he said something like that. That's as far as in that discourse I know with Land. But like I thought it was like kind of interesting. He's like, no, like racism that follows by alliance and not affiliation is hyper racism. I thought like I don't know, like there was something of like a novelty to the specificity of like the way he was right wing, but like if anything it was like similar to hyperstition. Somebody had like a thing about like the myth, how the role the myth plays in what do you call it, Sorel, like the myth of the general strike is like a proto hyperstition, and like the distinction between like Marx and Sorel was kind of like Marxists were saying like, oh, like these Sorel and these anarchists are like voluntarists, and it was like they believe in free will, and we're like more determinists, and they think you can just will the revolution, and we think you have to like follow teleologically, and like I didn't know like I don't know, like I know like how that kind of like determinism, non-determinism played out like on the left between the different sections, like between the Sorelians and the Marxists back in the day, but I didn't know like how that played out in Nick Land. Like he seemed to be into that like, oh, like fragmentation's good, and we should just divide it, like that phrase people was going around like a 1,000 tiny Liechtensteins, like Europe should just, when he's talking about like Europe breaking up, and then like half of the lectures he was doing like on spatiality was like, how do we get the U.S. to divide into like blue America and red America?
Yeah, so like as far as that goes, like in Land, I don't think it's like contradictions. Isn't it just he's inconsistent on the, like I know this is like, I think we're getting away from memes, except for the fact that, you know, about half of what I do is just posting photos of Nick Land's head on something. But it's, you know, he's not, I don't think he's contradictory. He's inconsistent, and he's become more inconsistent over time. Like, you know, Fang Numina is a collection of his works over time. And it's they're not in dialogue with each other necessarily in the way, you know, where I think, you know, and maybe I'm being romantic about Nietzsche, like at least Nietzsche shits on himself a little bit, like, or critiques himself, whereas Land just moves on and on and on and on and on and on, and he'll just do things inconsistently, you know, as they appear to him. And I don't like, you know, I'm not interested in doing a biography of Land, or sort of, or even a sort of an archaeology of Landian thought. But he does seem to be inconsistent, you know, around the idea of voluntarism and free will. And I think, you know, if we wanted to say, you know, I think like people think, you know, Land is a very D&G style thinker, but I think D&G aren't particularly interested in the difference between voluntarism and teleology, as they are in determining the conditions from which either can emerge. Whereas I don't think Land takes that, you know, until, and maybe I'm missing something here, but until, like, you know, the critique of transcendental miserabilism, I don't think he's particularly interested in transcendental thought at all. So I might be super wrong, and I might be not answering the question, but yeah, I just think he's inconsistent rather than contradictory. And I know that they're like tightly interwound. But I also feel like maybe doing tons of fucking drugs, you know, helps with that. Also, I've been drinking, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
My internet connection always drops out at exactly the moment we get something interesting going on, like how mass amounts of drugs inform your philosophy, and exactly how Justin Murphy wants to define hyper racism. Like, this is really inopportune internet connection issues.
Wait, so you're interested in definitions, Wittgenstein?
I like language games. What can I say?
All right, so here's the problem with structuralism. Okay.
Yeah, there is someone at the CIA that's flipping my internet switch. It's true. This is all psyop. It's me, by the way. I'm the Fed.
Wait, so you actually are the paranoid body type.
Some of us are monomaniacs, okay?
Like, we're all being constantly assailed by the forces of the outside. You're not in the Landian sense. So we can work on this, which means, everybody change your insides to get to the outside.
There you go.
Which is honestly going to destroy your liver and kidneys. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah. That's the...
Drugs have a natural affinity against the state. Cooking, that's the state. Like good.
Yeah. Again, everyone, reminder for when you're modifying your organs, do not remove them. Just disorganize them. It's okay. You don't want no one remove their liver today.
Looks like Deebs needs psychoanalysis to deal with this. He's got like a Schreiber kind of effect going on, except for with somatic components. Yeah, so oh shit. Now, can we bring this back to do we need to bring this back to memes, or are we happy staying in this massively abstract sphere?
Oh yeah, something concrete like memes.
Which I've argued constantly is no. I promise you, they're not concrete. It's a different kind of. It's not a category, but we have to say category because, as D&G say, it's nice to talk like normal people. When they say that, they're disingenuous.
Well, there's something funny about like philosophers where like they always seem clearer in interviews. I don't. It seems like no one just will write in that style, in that conversational style.
Have you read Heidegger's Der Spiegel interview? It's
what it should, I guess.
Anyway, I'm just shitting on Heidi, but yeah, he's just like, hey, do you feel bad about being a Nazi? And then it's unclear for pages. Sorry, because yeah, like Sartre's interviews are like, yeah, listening to like Deleuze's interviews, much more clear.
Yeah.
Well, he has that. It is that French thing, and I know like Foucault said that like 10% of his writing was bullshit, and I think just he would get like the approval of the French intelligentsia, but also even Deleuze said something like to that effect too, with difference in repetition, that he had to like make it a little like more wonky and academic than needed. Just to like get it past the committee or whatever. Though I think Deleuze's early works, his monographs in particular, are very like classic. They're very clear. In his book on Spinoza, the two books on Spinoza. I think it's when he gets to. Difference in repetition was, I guess, one of his dissertations, so he had to make it more impenetrable. But then again, when he meets Guattari, that's they go on their own line of flight, and it's not about what it means or it's about what it does, and they get really experimental and whatnot. But I think in comparison to someone like Derrida, who is like kind of enacting like the limits of language, and he's being obscure. I think he is actually being obscure on purpose. And Lacan too, although Lacan, maybe it's more fact, except for Cree, it was more lectures and maybe than actual writings. Maybe there was like, there's an issue of translation there. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on the readability of these French postmodernists or what have you.
I mean, I don't really consider them like that much of a. I mean, once again, it's like the problem of the universal, like what's meant by postmodernists, and it's like I feel like Foucault, Deleuze, Guattari, I guess like Claire Parnett are all kind of like in some kind of alliance together, and there's others, and like I've never looked at Derrida in my life. I don't feel like he's in that clique. He's like, he might fall under that same umbrella term, but sure. I feel like something else is going on over there. That kind of gets looped in. I mean, because I don't feel like Deleuze is necessarily like philosopher opaque as much as like wants to be style, like wants to have like right style, like with a lot of style, like the Americans. Like I don't feel like he wants to be Derrida. I feel like he wants to be like Carroll.
No, probably not.
That last remark by Tom was fantastic. That's so. You've just lit a joyous fire under me.
Like, so one of my favorite pieces by Lacan. I'm sorry.
Oh,
is his Seminar 11. And one of the reasons that I love Seminar 11 so much is because it is this hysterical, extremely funny wandering where he's trying to explain to this room full of people, all right, guys, I know I got excommunicated from psychoanalysis. And let me tell you why that's totally cool and fine and why it's not cool or fine. And my internet just cut out, didn't it?
I hear you. We were talking about Lacan, or at least Thorian was before he got sucked up by the earth.
The cliffhanger around something 11, 9/11, never forget.
Seminar 11 never happened.
Never forget.
Bush did Seminar 11.
So, do we need a new line, or?
So I didn't know like George Bush Sr. like trying to murder Reagan to be president was a conspiracy theory until like yesterday. Just found a new one. You're like who is keeping all these conspiracy theories from me? There is a conspiracy to stop me from getting access to all of the knowledge of conspiracies. Conspiracies in general, I think of as like the micro politics of the ruling class, and that like I don't know. I feel like I can conceive of that.
Are they more like superstitions?
Not necessarily.
Are they like? Please elaborate. Go on.
Oh, just like you know, it's like the elite the micro politics, the small alliances, the individual relationships, and what comes out of them, the things we inherently don't know, that like that there must exist like conspiracies on some level, probably many more than we would ever know, but they're like knowing they exist and having is almost like the same as knowing we would have no knowledge of them. So like it's kind of just I assume like an agnosticism around like most everything that involves secrets between the rich, or special access and how access plays out. I feel like that capitalism produces a lot of black boxes. That like the hiding of information and access to information just plays like this pivotal role after a certain point in the process of accumulation, where Yeah, corporate secrets, shady money. I don't know, like the conditions are advantageous to successful secrecy, so that you're going to expect a lot of secrecy among people in the ruling class, and that the way this would play and what this would be called would be conspiracy. But I consider it just like the micro politics of the wealthy, or micro politics of the ruling class, but not always ruling class. Yeah, I mean, often often the only joy of a bureaucrat is to be able to harm those who upset you, and who knows how much the I don't know how many petty conspiracies there are is not just large ones. I don't know. I've seen a lot of shady stuff in the housing industry. I'll say that. I've never heard anyone talk about it. And I would only know because of where I've worked. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what I've missed. So if someone can clarify a little bit of that for me, that would be great. And also, just like Lacan, who was not angry about being excommunicated by the psychoanalytic community, I'm not angry about my internet disconnecting us constantly either. I think it's actually really cool, and it makes a good point, which I will not clarify.
It's the 5 minute the punctuation in practice.
Yes. From now on, every time I go to one of these sessions, they'll be 5 to 15 minutes, and we'll call it a day. It'll be great. Sorry, Victor, I think you were starting to say something.
He was just I think Tom was just talking about conspiracy theories, and one of the things that was really made me skeptical about conspiracy theories in general, and I think has been served as a very good antidote, is that participating in any project with maybe more than 3 people, it doesn't even matter the degree of education, is so complicated that it's very hard to believe that some of the most complex conspiracy theories could work just because people fuck up. And the more people you have, the chance for fucking up something along the way increases a lot. But that being said, I think there's plenty of opportunism. And like you said, a bureaucrat has in his power, even by effect of his effects, right? Because a bureaucrat is someone who with very low energy, the type that maybe the describing of signing something or typing a document, a bureaucrat can have a lot of effect in the real world, more than someone not in that position. So opportunist through that is where real conspiracies get their actuation in the world somehow. And it's always around that, someone, either a politician or a bureaucrat, or someone who can allow some weird flow of energy that you can take in consideration in favor of your group, or whatever you define the group. It can be just a small people, but whatever. So I think Tom really has a point on that. And the housing industry, I really can't. This has been something that probably one of the most ancient sort of conspiracy or cartels or whatever is the building sector.
Right. So has anyone seen this? Sorry. What was that?
Oh no, I was just making a dumb joke. The building 7 sector.
Nice. But with this whole micropolitics or conspiratorial micropolitics stuff that Tom was bringing up, I think that's a great thought. And has anyone here seen this incredible movie Cube? Older sci-fi movie, like 90s, maybe late 80s. I think it's 90s.
What's the
rooms?
I think I have.
Yeah, the idea is that there's this big old box that a bunch of people wake up in. They don't know how they got there. They all wake up in little boxes that are interconnected, and some of them have traps, and some of them don't. And so they have to wander through this space trying to get out of it. And they get acid sprayed at them, and they get cut in half, and all sorts of great things. But there are all these, short scenes in it where people are just like, what the fuck? Where did this come from? Why is it here? Why are we here? And the most satisfying and best answer for me for that was that one guy just says, this is a headless blunder. Like this thing isn't built as a way to test anyone. This happened on accident. And I've loved this idea of like an extremely complicated mechanism that produces untold suffering that exists for no reason and just happened because someone designed something on accident somewhere, and then someone else filled in the gaps, and then someone else filled in gaps elsewhere. And then suddenly you have this giant monster machine that just makes life so much worse. And really, I think that's how a lot of this conspiracy stuff works, is that it's this accumulation of small errors and biases and mistakes and maybe even little nefarious doings. No, exactly. My theory of government as well. And it just leads us to these bizarre situations where conspiracy becomes actualized simply because, bureaucracy exists, or because people are people. And it's, micropolitics, conspiratorial micropolitics. I like it.
I like that you mentioned this movie. I don't know, have you watched the sequels?
Yes. Hypercube, pretty good. Cube Zero, terrible.
Exactly.
Terrible.
So the Hypercube is the one so in the one, like you said, this is big old cube, right? It's still something that maybe you can see it could exist in the world. Maybe China built it, you could see this happening in the world somewhere with the current technology. But on Hypercube, they kind of go a bit too far.
It folds time inside of it, like different rooms. Yeah, it's a mess.
but what it was really cool about this the sequel, that I thought, like, what happened is that so you can find multiple versions of yourself in there of other people. So after a while you have to understand, okay, not how this individual is and what is his experience, because you don't know what version of the person is, but you can understand his sort of archetype. So is this someone that I trust in the past? Is this someone that I got fucked? And sometimes you cannot pass that experience on because you die. Like there's one guy who becomes a cannibal, and the way you can see how he's portrayed, like he walks with a lot of the sort of cards from the other people that has been collected, right? So if you go through this person, depending on how much information you have on the cube, you would be pretty suspicious of him. And the faster you can recognize this archetype as a threat, I would say the more chance for you to survive, right? And I think this is Tom was talking before about intuition and this sort of stuff, which is I think really relates to this sort of stuff. Okay, you're put on this puzzle where it's mostly unknown unknowns. What is the biggest generalization you can have? And in the Hypercube, I don't really know, do they solve this? Do you remember if this has a happy ending?
I think it does. I think Cube is the only one that has a kind of a dismal ending, but I don't remember. Cube's the only really good one. So, but no, I think there's something good to think about here when it comes to this multiplicity of people and the same repeating person over and over again, and that producing a kind of conspiratorial kind of experience, and how I love psychoanalysis, but I love it in the sense that I think it applies very poorly to individual people. And I think it being practiced on individual people is really irresponsible. But I do think that applying it to larger systems, because it's a blunt tool and because we have that noise, right? that it does work reasonably well for something like that. And in the same way that we talk about all of these different problems in the id inside of psychoanalysis, which then lead to symptoms, which are the id working itself out, and that the symptom is in fact something that we want to occur to some degree until we become bored with our own symptoms, that the same thing is occurring within larger conspiracies, right? So you have you have these huge groups of people who are similar in the sense that they're, they have some kind of overlap culturally or otherwise, or that they just interact in the same systems. They're touching the same rhizome, right? And so they have similarities that are kind of inbuilt, or not inbuilt, but induced, and that this leads to a replication of the same errors and conspiracies and strange little happenings. It's the same. It's a micropolitics, but at a larger scale, right? And how we can psychoanalyze these larger systems and look at the symptoms that form out of it and what it might. Yeah, I think I've already made my point, but I'm trying to add more words onto it and then produce a conclusion after I've already concluded. So maybe I should just shut up. I wonder if people are seeing where I'm going with that.
I think you're basically talking about sort of understanding the symbolic order of this, whatever it is that is larger than an individual. So the symbolic order of a set of people or a country or whatever is the boundary you're defining to something. Or
yeah,
my very poor interpretation, also from not doing proper readings, but this is why, if this rings a bell, this was my brain told me while we was talking. Is this the symbolic order? Is he talking about finding a symbolic order, and this is why it's useful? Because if you can navigate a symbolic order from the collective, and it also has some representation in the individual, it's more a better use than, I don't know, you said like treating individual people,
right?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I guess the point that ultimately I'm trying to make is simply that so much of the conspiratorial work that we end up seeing out in the world, and so much of like the patterns that we see inside of some like the algorithm on Instagram or anything like that, isn't because of individual choices, but because of this larger symptom produced by a society from a bunch of individuals who function as if they're the id, barely held in by the ego. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right on point. And with the language models we have, like GPT-3, and you can do a Lacanian analysis. Like I don't know if Deleuze and Dragons, were you playing the AI RPG at one point? I don't remember.
Yeah, AI dungeon. Yeah.
Exactly. Don't you think that if you do a Lacanian analysis of what happens in that discourse, you would come out some pretty disturbing things about whoever we got the data from, and of course it's from everyone.
Of course. So this is in some sense, it titillates me. But it titillates me inside the symbolic order, right? It's producing desires that already exist. It's doing nothing new. It's only not forcing. It's forcefully encouraging me to glut what is, to glut on what is described. It has nothing to do with new territories. And also like, because I still play it because I'm so pathetically lonely in lockdown. But so I still play this damn thing, and I'm constantly, like I said, would you like to do this or that? So you can train the AI. You can opt out in the options if you would like. Now I'm not going to, because I want to train the AI so I have a better game, but I'm only training myself further into these fucking parameters, right? If that makes sense, like.
Yeah, sure. But one thing that I want to ask you, like in your experience playing, like, have you tried to go more freestyle writing with him, like not pretend it's a game or do commands?
Oh no, constantly. Yeah. So I am constantly trying to, I originally started playing it, sort of trying to get like vaguely sort of quest structures, like I almost straight away started to avoid, it gives you like, I think like 8 different prompts or a custom prompt. I started writing my own. Mm-hmm. But then I started to make my prompts more and more abstract. And then I started making my prompts and this is going to be predictable, because I think I've actually posted some of these, just direct quotes from like Land or Deleuze, where it just says, here's the starting situation, and then I respond in, absurd, anti-narrative fashions. And what I'm constantly pushed up against is even being anti-narrative still leaves the narrator intact. I'm not immune. Like, this is the whole problem of modernism. Modernism, and also the problem. So, modernism in one sense, tries to break down the mastery that modernity gives us, but also theory, which is just a critical kind of modernism, breaks down our capacity to even make that break. And so I've been trying this on with AI Dungeon, and I do it I've spent way too much time on AI Dungeon, but it's getting better in the sense, but by this I just mean sophisticated. It's still not it still gets stuck in feedback loops of narrative. It's never it doesn't and also the horrible thing is I can see what other people are training it to do as well, and I've got to tell you, it really likes stepmom situations.
I'm stuck in the refrigerator again.
Yeah. It's because it's super libidinal, but it's also when it introduces, say, sex, it either introduces it as some kind of Oedipal situation, or as some kind of terrible violence. And
so is this a Westward situation? Do you feel like it's a poor man's, this word available, Westward situation?
Sure. Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question. And there's a guy, I don't know if he has his doctorate yet, but I've read a couple of his papers. So Vincent Lee or Vincent Lay. Yeah. So he wrote a paper on I forget the exact name of it, and it came out maybe I think 2 or 3 years ago. But it was something I forget the exact name, but it was about sort of inhumanism, Nick Land and Westworld, and sort of pointing out this we can't escape the human in vectors like Westworld. We can't escape the present in vectors like Westworld, because we always get brought back to some kind of the axiology that we have, which I think is related to these mnemonics that we started with that have so deeply troubled me, because it's the uncanny valley is always a recognition. And even when we try and break this, break through that, we're bringing it back towards, problems of the one. So I don't know if that answers that, but yeah, so I am trying, I'm playing AI Dungeon because I'm lonely in lockdown and I love RPGs, and I would like to have more free-ranging tabletop kind of gaming in my life. And this seems like it's got it, but it also it's trained by the desires that have been created by by a collective that is also unified, that can be easily psychoanalyzed. So I'm psychoanalyzing my own gameplay and I'm meant to be an anti-psychoanalyst. So I'll stop there. I feel like I'm going way off now, but so I'll leave that.
But you piqued my curiosity about this thing. Like you say, you're still looking for this game where you have more narrative freedom. And I remember, I don't know if any of you is familiar with Dwarf Fortress, which was a bit of famous from some time for being this super complex simulator of things, but it generates narratives that you really have to put a lot of imagination to it, right? Because even its graphics are very ASCII based, but I played it for a while. Sometimes I remember I would pop up and try to go, and there's so much effort in it that keeps you kind of away from it. But also because it needs you to stop and breathe and read all the lines. You can only find these weird narratives that are going within it if you stop and you start navigating and you see what's being created from this rule set from the creator. And this guy has been sort of obsessive about it. I would say there's some seriously Ted Kaczynski vibes into this guy, but he's a super cool person. And I think he's just went another way. I think his name is Tarn Adams. But if you look at what happens within these boards, you can create a word that has an almost, it's not unlimited because like you said, you create a grammar and it's going to be repetition. But the moment you start seeing how things are happening in your world and you start adding meaning to them as you play, okay, why my dwarf came here? And then you look and you realize there's the rules of the game, like the cube. You know this is a simulation, and then he came here because he had a mug in his hand, and in this version, he cannot drop the mug. So you start playing around that, and you imagine a world where sometimes people grab an object and they cannot let go. And suddenly you are really having this very deep immersive experience where you try to, okay, let's see what crazy scenarios I can come, who are just very out of my control, that I can still be entertained by them, like in Dungeon and I, where I still feel like there's a narrator playing with me, and you have another, and there's this experience of I'm not that lonely. Maybe this is also something that you want, something that is just at the edge of is do what I want, but not really.
Yeah, so like all of this, like, gee, I feel like since meeting Victor, I've become more and more troubled by how I navigate the world. But so this makes me feel no, and thank you, because trouble is, I like this in Donna Haraway, Staying with the Trouble. What a provocative title. Everything that she might get wrong about D&G and Lovecraft. But I would say, here I feel like, in all of this, like we're never, like we become this Nietzschean last man in this really horrifying sense. When I'm playing AI Dungeon and I'm trying to, get out of the learning that it's had from other people, or develop, new narrative in experimental forms, which is really, I really thought that we could get there. And I think this is sort of Land's hope about, other structures of AI, maybe they're, generative in economies, and I think Land has a subtle enough understanding of economy to realize it's not just finance, but constantly defeated, because basically at the end of the day, I'm sitting, in my mattress on the floor, basically drool smiling while I'm like, I'm defeated. I'm teaching this AI Deleuze, and it won't get it, man. And adding RPG elements, it's almost in the same way that when I have the chance to play tabletop games and I'm the DM, I'm like, I've just gave these guys a rhizome. Like it doesn't change anything really. I just smile and laugh, and soon I will die. Like, and sorry, like maybe that's let's increase entropy, let's accelerate entropy. Sorry, this is very egoistic. So yeah, but trying to
praxis, increase entropy as a praxis. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no. So wait. Isn't this basically? Well, like I used to think this was Land's praxis, or his idea of what praxis should be. Now I just think it's descriptive. I don't think that I think if you're really a serious determinist, especially around the idea of singularity, the idea of praxis or not becomes irrelevant, which I think sort of dovetails a little bit away from where we were looking at the clock like an hour and a half ago. But yeah, I don't know that, like it seems that praxis can't possibly exist in any like, to use analytic philosophy terms, in any thick sense. Like the clap of its cheeks does nothing except for create a pleasing affect.
Even alert the guards.
I'm just saying the piping of idiot flutes is reflected in the drumming of thick, like, how do you, I think you guys say asses.
Is this a koan? Like, what's the sound of one butt clapping?
Danko?
I'm just thinking of more koan type things. The sound of one butt clapping in the woods.
Produces 1,000 young. Yog Sothoth Ia. Sorry.
Exactly.
But I think, man, praxis is more about you in a personal sense. Like, you can totally tell how praxis affects things around you, and that shouldn't be underestimated. That's my distance, because the moment you get cynical about praxis, you're just like, plug me into the matrix or whatever. I don't really think that's a good way to live a life while you still have a body.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So what, to have a life while you still have a body? What is life without a body? And also, is it different? Okay, because like I think we're winding, like we've got half an hour left. So life without a body, because like Deleuze, I think consistently is being accused of being a vitalist. I think this is a fine accusation, and I think it's, you know, descriptive and prescriptive. Deleuzeans should be vitalists. But is there a difference between life without organs and life without a body? And, you know, maybe that just sounds like Luke's trying to do some dumb shit philosophy. But, you know, we're getting to the end of a 2-day seminar, and we've done a ton of dense stuff. And one last question.
Can you repeat the question?
Is there a difference? What's the difference? Okay, so I think in some sense, is there a difference between life without a body and life without organs? And also, if there is life with either or not, like would one be better than the other? Like, and then defining better, is better a normative, or is better a practical? Because like we're nominally, I think everyone here is at least sort of interested in Deleuze, as Dorian said last night, nominal Deleuzeanism, you know, which sounds, again, like it's so hard to talk about Deleuze and nominalism. But yeah, so is it better? Would it be, if life could maintain with a body or with an organs, one without the other, would one be better than the other? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so I'm really reaching now because we've been doing this for 2 days, over 6 hours. And I'm trying to bring it back to, you know, the texts that we've read, even, you know, and we've ranged so widely. And tonight, this, you know, this is great for me, massively disturbed as I am now. Probably going to have like some kind of like Lovecraftian breakdown, you know, grow fins and dive into the sea.
I can only hope. You know?
Oh God, it's my involution must obtain, man. My unnatural participation. But yeah, so like, is there a difference? Like, yeah, so vitalism without organs, vitalism without bodies, like, are these things discernible? And also, what does that got to do with a meme? As we round up. let's really roll it together in the next like 25 minutes. And then no one ever has to talk to me again. But please, my DMs are open, and Deebs, I love you. Oh, he raised his eyebrows at me. I think he's keen.
That's true.
On friendship. Oh. My Canatus is extended.
That's I mean, so one of the things that Thousand Grugot used to say, if you guys remember him, is this thing that was really, it was a joke that wasn't as dumb as it sounds, but also significantly dumber than it sounds. But it's, guys, skin is an organ. And I think it was supposed to be just kind of this catty response to, you know, these visions of a body without organs. And it's like, well, yeah, even the outside is an organ. But then if you think about it, you know, the delineation of a body as a body at all is its own organization compared to a larger system. And so a body as a body is a body with organ, or an organized body to some degree, right? So it's, again, this molar, molecular, micro, macro kind of question. But yeah, I think a body is organized.
But what does that say about life, though?
Nothing.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's that we can only deterritorialize things to certain limits, and that it always, like I always bring up, extends or complicates the previous territory, right? So it's difficult to make these changes without dragging in a little bit of the past, the future with it.
So I have one question then about like, oh, okay, sorry, I didn't hear Thomas talking. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I can't hear what Tom's saying.
Yeah, hard to hear you, Tom.
Oh no, you're always bringing in the past and future, and it's like the difference between skill and grace. You swing a hammer with skill, you swing a sword with grace. Like the vertical versus the vertical. you're moving your body through time, and everything else becomes an extension of your body, and that's the anti-humanism. That's the organization. That's the that's finding out what a body can do, and your skin is on your surface. That's the surface element, but you may be in the process, redefining even what a body is, finding new motions, new techniques, and you can extend your will for centuries over centuries through institutions, but in moments of automatic movement, in moments of automatic graceful movement, you're living that vitality, and I don't know how much memes are more than an expression of a capacity to a higher power. Sometimes they can be a demonstration of skill, but I think like we too much get away from embodied motion, embodied skillful motion, raising yourself to a higher power, and simplify down to we don't raise ourselves to a higher power by accumulate information, accumulate goods, but do we accumulate skills and capacities in the same way? And I think that there's really something about the body that exceeds just existence, that there can be being without a body but not becoming.
Did we do it? Did we explain Deleuze to you? We didn't dumb it down to some vague shit. Did we do it?
Who still wants to kill us?
Yeah, please still.
No one. Okay, we're stuck in our own Oedipal struggles still. Then.
Well, no, I think Mike said he'd do it. I think Mike's gonna kill us.
Oh shit.
He's on the cosmic libertarian team.
No one's gonna let you in. No one's gonna let you into Australia at this point. So I'm safe.
Oh, that's a bummer, man.
Yeah, like I seek oblivion all the time. So, and this is some bullshit. Is it, so? Yeah, sorry. I was off for a second, but yeah, is this the terminal point of this 2-day colloquium? This highly civilized, highly theoretical, masterfully organized. Thank you, Foreign Objekt Sepideh, for organizing this, and really wonderfully paneled by
he's brilliant
by Danko and beyond work, and vastly interrupted by my bullshit. But have we reached it? Like I don't want to say the point. Can I just do a dumb Deleuze pun?
Please.
The end of the line. Have we hit? Have we hit a new BWO? Is this the end of our this intensity and the beginning of more intensities? Sorry, battalions might want to say something different. I'll shut up.
Yeah, I think it is. I think we did it. I think we squeezed some blood out of this.
Are we at level 2?
Well, what's playing us is.
That's terrifying. Look behind me. It's hard. It's not good.